The emergency HOA meeting packed the community center beyond capacity. Karen arrived early, documents organized in neat folders, her resignation letter folded in her jacket pocket. She'd spent the night drafting it, each word carefully chosen to preserve whatever dignity remained. But as residents filed in, something unexpected happened. Old Mr. Rodriguez, who'd been feuding with Karen over his garden gnomes for 3 years, nodded respectfully. The Morrison family, who she'd cited for Christmas decorations in January, sat in the front row looking sympathetic. Before we begin, Karen stood, her voice steadier than she felt. I owe everyone an apology, especially the Henderson family. Jim and Sarah sat together, their children flanking them like small soldiers. Karen met their eyes directly. I destroyed your pool because I was afraid of losing control, afraid of change, afraid that if I wasn't vigilant every moment, everything would fall apart. She paused, gathering courage. I was wrong, completely, devastatingly wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen continued, I've prepared my resignation and recommendations for new leadership. But first, I want to make things right. She pulled out her phone, dialing a familiar number. Bob? It's Karen. Yes, I know it's late. I need you back at the Henderson property tomorrow. Full pool reconstruction, upgraded features, rush job. She paused, listening to the quote, Fine, whatever it costs. Sarah Henderson wiped her eyes. Karen, you don't have to. Yes, I do. And I'm establishing a community improvement fund. My contribution will cover any family who wants to make reasonable modifications to their property. The room erupted in surprised chatter. Gerald looked shocked. Even Karen was surprised by her own words. Furthermore, she continued, momentum building. I'm proposing we eliminate half the existing HOA restrictions. That outdated, petty, and frankly, I wrote most of them during what I now recognize was a particularly controlling phase of my life. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. Karen, we don't want your resignation. What? You made a terrible mistake. Jim Henderson stood up. But you're trying to fix it. That's more than most people would do. We've all watched you fight for this neighborhood for decades, added Mrs. Patterson. One bad day doesn't erase that. Karen felt the room's energy shifting again, but differently this time. Not away from her, but towards something resembling forgiveness. I propose a modified solution. Dr. Patel spoke from the back. Karen remains on the board, but not as president. We establish a 3-person council to prevent future unilateral decisions. The vote was surprisingly close. Karen retained her position, but with checks and balances. As neighbors filed out, making plans for a neighborhood barbecue to welcome back the Henderson pool, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty about the future. Gerald found her cleaning up empty coffee cups. So what now? Karen looked out the window toward the Henderson house, where contractors' trucks were already gathering. Now I learned to be a neighbor instead of a warden. But as they walked home, Karen's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Impressive performance tonight. Some of us remember why you really tore down that pool. Sleep tight, Karen. Her blood chilled. After all these years, was her past finally catching up? Karen Whitmore stood in her bathrobe at 6:47 am, coffee mug trembling in her manicured grip, as she stared at the monstrosity next door. The Hendersons had done it. They'd actually done it. A 20-foot kidney-shaped pool gleamed mockingly in the morning sun, complete with a waterfall feature that gurgled like liquid insubordination. 37 years, she whispered to herself, then louder, 37 years I've been HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates. Her husband Gerald shuffled onto the patio, squinting. Karen, it's not even 7. Look at that aquatic abomination. Karen jabbed her finger toward the fence. They finished it yesterday while I was at my sister's funeral. Gerald scratched his belly. Maybe we should. Should what? Let them turn our neighborhood into some tacky water park. Karen's voice pitched higher. I have 17 missed calls from concerned residents. 17, Gerald. She was already marching toward the house, her fuzzy slippers slapping against the flagstone. The HOA emergency contact list hung on her refrigerator like a sacred scroll. Her fingers flew across her phone screen. Bob, Bob, it's Karen. Yes, I know it's early. No, this cannot wait. I need your demolition crew here by 8:30. She paused, listening to protests. Bob, remember who got your nephew that construction permit last year? Exactly. Tear it down. Gerald appeared in the doorway, holding up his hands. Karen, you can't just. Watch me. Her eyes glittered with righteous fury. Section 4.2 of the HOA bylaws clearly states any major landscaping changes require board approval. They built without permits, but destroying someone's pool is protecting property values and community standards. Karen was already dialing another number. This is bigger than a pool, Gerald. This is about respect, authority, and the very fabric that holds civilized society together. By 8:15 a.m., Bob's demolition truck rumbled down Maple Lane. Karen stood at her front window, watching neighbors emerge from their houses like prairie dogs sensing predators. Mrs. Chen clutched her newspaper. The Patels whispered urgently on their driveway. The Hendersons' front door flew open. Jim Henderson, still in his work shirt from the previous night, ran toward the pool as the demolition crew unloaded their equipment. What the hell is going on? He shouted. Karen stepped onto her porch, chin raised. Good morning, Jim. I'm implementing emergency HOA enforcement procedures. You can't destroy our pool. Actually, Karen smiled coldly, producing a thick folder from her robe pocket. I can and I am. You violated 17 separate community guidelines. The pneumatic drill roared to life. 3 hours later, the Henderson pool was a crater of broken concrete and twisted metal. Karen surveyed the destruction from her porch swing, sipping iced tea like a general reviewing conquered territory. The entire neighborhood had gathered, forming a semicircle around the former aquatic paradise. You've lost your mind. Jim Henderson's voice cracked. His wife Sarah stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. I've protected our community, Karen replied calmly. Perhaps next time you'll follow proper procedures. We saved for 3 years for that pool, Sarah whispered. Our kids' friends were coming over today for a pool party. Something flickered across Karen's face. Was it regret? But she straightened her shoulders. Actions have consequences. You should have considered that before building without approval. Young Tommy Chen, barely 10 years old, stepped forward. Mrs. Karen, why did you break their pool? It looked fun. The innocence in his voice made several adults shift uncomfortably. Karen's resolve wavered for a microsecond before hardening again. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions to protect everyone. But who are you protecting from a swimming pool? Asked Mrs. Patterson, the retired teacher from Pine Street. Karen felt the crowd's energy shifting. These weren't just neighbors anymore. They were potential insurgents questioning her authority. Property values, noise ordinances, safety regulations. Someone could have drowned. In their own backyard, Mr. Patel stepped forward. Karen, we've all known each other for decades. This isn't about regulations. Then what's it about? The question came from Gerald, who'd been quietly watching from their doorway. Karen turned, eyes blazing. It's about order, Gerald. It's about respect for the rules that keep our neighborhood from becoming chaos. But as she spoke, she caught her reflection in their front window. Wild-haired, still in her bathrobe at noon, standing over the ruins of a family's dream. For the first time in hours, uncertainty crept into her voice. I'm protecting all of you. From precedent, if we let one family break the rules. What rules? Jim pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. I read every single HOA guideline before we built. There's nothing about pools requiring pre-approval. Karen's face paled. Section 4.2 clearly states. Section 4.2 is about garden structures over 6 feet tall, Sarah said quietly. I memorized every word before we spent our life savings. The crowd murmured. Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet like quicksand. She'd been so certain, so righteous. But now, surrounded by accusing stares and broken concrete, doubt crept in like cold fog. I was protecting, she started, then stopped. There must be some violation. I'll find it. She hurried toward her house. Gerald following with worried eyes. By evening, Karen had spread every HOA document across her dining room table like a desperate war strategist. Gerald brought her dinner, which sat untouched as she flipped through regulations, searching for justification that seemed to evaporate with each page. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Text messages flooded in. Karen, we need to talk. Emergency HOA meeting tomorrow. This has gone too far. Each notification felt like a small betrayal. Find anything? Gerald asked gently. Karen's hands shook slightly as she held up a faded document. The Architectural Review Committee guidelines from 1987. They're ambiguous about water features. Gerald sat beside her, studying her face. In 32 years of marriage, he'd never seen her look so lost. Karen, what's really going on? This isn't like you, isn't it? Her laugh sounded hollow. I've been HOA president since before most of these people moved here. I've maintained standards, kept property values stable, resolved disputes. And the one time I'm not here to oversee things. You were at your sister's funeral. Margaret always said I cared more about other people's business than family. Karen's voice cracked. Maybe she was right. The doorbell rang. Through the window, they could see half the neighborhood gathered on their front lawn. Jim Henderson stood at the front, no longer angry, just tired. Gerald opened the door. Jim, I'm sorry about. Is Karen available? We need to discuss next steps. Karen appeared, having changed into proper clothes, but looking smaller somehow. I suppose you want my resignation. We want to understand, said Mrs. Chen. The Karen we know doesn't destroy people's dreams over technicalities. The pool was beautiful, added Mrs. Patterson. My grandchildren were excited to visit. Karen felt tears threatening. I thought they were undermining everything I've worked to build here. This neighborhood used to be perfect. It was never perfect, Jim said quietly. But it was home. And neighbors don't do what you did to us today. I'll pay for the pool reconstruction, Karen whispered. Full replacement plus damages. It's not about money. Sarah spoke for the first time since morning. It's about trust. How do we trust someone who can rationalize destruction? The words hit Karen like physical blows. She'd spent decades building her reputation as the neighborhood guardian and destroyed it in one morning of righteous fury. I'll resign from the HOA board, she said finally. Karen, Gerald placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Maybe we should think. No, I've thought enough for one day. She looked at each neighbor. I'll call an emergency meeting for tomorrow night. New elections. Fresh start. As the crowd dispersed, Karen remained on her porch, watching the Hendersons stare at their ruined backyard. Gerald brought her a sweater as the sun set. What happens now? He asked. Karen didn't answer immediately. In the growing darkness, she could hear the Hendersons' children crying inside the house.